somebody thinks somewhere that growing cotton is still a good idea.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Comstock Channel. I'm Marlin Bohling, and I'm pleased to welcome aboard Ken Lege, and he is an assistant professor and also an extension cotton specialist with Texas A&M University. I believe I got that close to right
That's cool.
for the title. You must have a very wide door to get that all on there, Ken.
Right.
Uh, Ken's a good contributor here that we call on from time to time when we're talking about the Southern Plains and in particular, the cotton crop. And this year, of course, they've been busy planting. Ken, from what I understand, you've been out there actually working with putting in test plots and that sort of thing. I know we tried to maybe set up an interview a couple of weeks ago, and you were just too busy. Are you done with that now or not?
We've kind of gotten over the hump. So we were dry here in the Southern High Plains for most of April and the beginning of May, and then we were fortunate enough to get a really good, widespread, significant rainfall that hit nearly every location the first full weekend of May, that Mother's Day weekend. And so many areas were too wet to start planting, but there were some that began to put seed in the ground on that Monday, the 12th, following that rain. So rainfall and moisture is key to getting the cotton crop up here in the Southern High Plains. We're 85, 90% dry land, so when you have planting moisture, you plant. And so it began in earnest on May 12th in most areas of the Southern High Plains, and has really been a marathon, is what I've called it, for the last couple of weeks. Areas north of Amarillo are pretty much winding down. Of course, their insurance deadline is May 31st. And then the area between that's north of Lubbock to about Tulia, so the northern half of the Southern High Plains, is also wrapping up. They have a planting deadline of either May 31st or June 5th. And they've been able to, that little area has been able to get more rainfall since that big rain. So there has been some occasional showers that have fallen in that area. The area south of Lubbock has not been as fortunate. This week they begin to get a few scattered showers, but they missed out on a lot of the widespread rain. And of course, those are typified by very coarse sandy soils, so they don't have a lot of moisture retention. And that area is probably 99% dry land, and the irrigation that we do have there is very light, so they're highly dependent on planting moisture. In layered on all those challenges, we did have quite a few bouts of very windy conditions where we had moisture and then the winds came and surface moisture dried up very, very quickly. So you look at the drought monitor the last couple of weeks, and it looks like we're living in the land of milk and honey with no drought. But, there is moisture deep, but you need that surface moisture. And the top 2 to 4 inches have been fairly dried out. So that's why we need those planting rains to get the cotton crop and other species up to be able to get those crops emerged and established because that surface moisture leaves the soil very, very quickly with the 40, 60 mile an hour winds with very low humidity. And at the time we were having 95 to 100 degree daytime highs. So a lot of evaporation under those circumstances.
All things considered, though, how would you compare this year to the past 4 or 5 years? I mean, you have really gone through a terrible drought spell.
In most areas, I would say we're a little bit better. We do have a full profile. Now, last year was a very similar circumstance where it was very, very dry during the winter and early spring, and then we had that widespread rain. The only difference between this year and last year, hopefully, is that we did get a good stand last year because we had a full profile. And, the old timers here will always say, well, if you start with a full profile, you're going to make a dryland cotton crop. Well, not always. We had historically high heat and wind in late July and early August last year that just destroy the dry land and light water crop. So we're hoping we're not facing that. But all things considered, I would say Lubbock northward, we're off to about the best start we've been since probably 2021. But yeah, you're right. 2022 and 23 in particular were just really harsh years, and 24 almost led us into complacency because it started out so well. And the first part of July, we thought we had a great crop, and then it went over the cliff after that. So the areas south of Lubbock are the ones that really haven't seen a lot of relief. They've had 4 tough years in a row, and this year it's still dry down there. We were only having scattered showers with very isolated, half-inch rains here or there. In that area badly needs a really widespread 1-inch rain to really get started well. But they also have till June 20th to get the crop in, so we do have time.
Well, you mentioned the earlier season, the high winds that you had, and that can be pretty common out there.
Yep.
And I remember in years past when I covered the cotton crop down in that part of the country, you have battled high winds, but they come after the crop is up many times. And like you say, when it's so dry, that presents an unusual problem. And that has to do with the electrostatic problem on the young cotton plants.
Yeah.
You might explain that, and is that still a threat?
It still is a threat. Growers have tried to adopt cover crops as much as they can because that does provide a lot of protection for young seedlings. And it's good for moisture retention, but we're a place that has very limited moisture, and that cover crop requires moisture as well. So sometimes it's easier said than done getting that cover crop established on light water or dry land. So we do have some that have it, the grand majority this year because it was so dry in the winter and early springtime. A lot of areas simply don't have a cover crop, so they resorted to conventional till. So when those winds do come and you do get a crop up, if you're fortunate enough to get that early season stand up and you have those young seedlings out there, this is a unique problem that you mentioned is static injury. And so you have all those soil particles, say in a conventionally tilled situation where you have all those soil particles close to the ground running past those seedlings, and static electricity builds up in that small layer close to the ground, and that static electricity can actually cause a necrosis or burn on those early seedlings, and in extreme cases can actually take out a cotton stand. And at times it's very tough to diagnose because you have to rule out insects, you have to rule out herbicide injury, etc., and finally, even rule out sand damage itself, and come to the conclusion, this is really static burn rather than all these others.
Yeah, it's almost like rubbing wool on a carbon rod, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's a fascinating phenomenon out there. All right, so talk to me about the way the farmers are looking at their cotton crop this year. Is the acreage down? Because I look over at the price, and as we're recording this, we've been hovering around 68 cents for new crop cotton for a better part of a month or so. That's not a lot of incentive, is it?
No, it's not. So, West Texas, the mainstay of West Texas is cotton. And so you look at all the other allied industries that are dependent on cotton beyond just the growers. You look at the equipment companies, the gins especially, and all the suppliers for all the gins. You're talking about a huge industry there that's dependent on cotton, and you got to have cotton flowing through the supply chain to make all this work. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a lot of crop abandonment, so volume through the gin has gone down. So a lot of these industries are suffering right now, and I think growers and other industry leaders are kind of reluctant to take a chance on cotton because, as you say, it's only 68 cents. And there's lots of uncertainties. We were talking about the tariffs earlier, all the uncertainties associated with that. That's on top of your regular run-of-the-mill stresses and challenges like weather and insects and all this that these guys face. So just an added layer of uncertainties with increased input cost for the most part across the board. A lot of these guys are looking at lowering inputs, either through lowering seeding rates because seeding rates and varieties are the first one to get scrutinized by the grower because it represents one of the first big costs. So that's one thing that you can cut back on. And admittedly, there is a wide window of plant populations that will deliver the same yield with proper management. So that is one place that you can cut to an extent as long as you have a good stand establishment. So we've seen reduced seeding rates. We've seen a little bit of an adoption of lower cost varieties, either older varieties that have been cut in price or lower layers of technology. So if they were using a BT plus a herbicide tolerant type variety, maybe they're going down to just a herbicide tolerant variety that's slightly cheaper. Or in some cases, we've seen a little bit of an increase in what we call brown bag or conventional. So the, having no herbicide or insecticide traits, and of course a lot lower input costs for that seed. So we are seeing that. The other thing that we're seeing is various row configurations, including what we're calling wide rows. So if they were on a 40-inch center for solid planted, maybe they're going to a skip row, two in, one out, or some are going to 80-inch rows, so one in, one out, as a means of trying to reduce those input costs, insurance premium costs, while being able to, cotton's very compensatory, so it can, under certain circumstances, compensate for that loss of stand in terms of, growing a good wider crop on an 80-inch center rather than on a 40-inch center. So we're seeing all sorts of strategies to try to reduce that input cost because I think, when you talk to the economist, no one knows when we might break that 68 cents mark. You talk to a lot of growers and ask them to get candid about what break-even cost is. A lot of them talk 80 to 85 cents for break-even. So here we sit at 68. It doesn't exactly incentivize you to increase your acres of cotton.
Boy, 80-inch rows, that seems like that would be hard to get a canopy.
And we don't get a canopy. And the truth is, even on 40-inch centers, for our light water and dry land scenarios, we rarely close canopy. So that's not unusual. It's I think a lot of it beyond the input cost. So you have lower seed costs, you have lower insurance premium costs because you're only insuring the planted acre. So there are some initial cost savings. As I said, cotton's very compensatory, so it will scavenge water in those gaps. And of course, the idea with those 80-inch rows is you're wanting those roots to exploit every bit of water in that gap. Hopefully, is that a more water use efficient system? We're testing that now to really determine if that's the case, beyond just the input cost savings. But you can get a little bit more cotton down the row and hopefully build up your APH that has deteriorated over years. So that's been another incentive for some of these growers to go to these wider row spacings. So it's a pretty complex system, and it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. And you don't see everybody trying it, but you see those types of strategies being tried. The other thing that we're seeing, and not a great number of acres, but we're seeing a lot more ELS or extra long staple cotton. This is Pima or Pima hybrids that are being tried, which is very tricky as you get higher elevation and higher latitudes. Some of these hybrids and full Pimas are very long seasons, so you're trying to finish that out. You got to have a spindle picker. Not many spindle pickers in this geography, and it's got to be roller gin. Now there are some gins in the southern high plains that have invested in roller gin technology, so that infrastructure is beginning to be in place, and as they say, if you build it, they will come, I suppose. So there is lots of interest, and that's probably been my number one question this winter in early spring is, hey, I'm going to try some ELS. What, is it going to make me more money than my upland? And so we do have a set of trials where we're comparing those systems as well to try to answer that question for growers.
So how much price premium could a grower get if they did grow that or would the extra transportation cost eat that up?
Yeah, very good question. So, as you know, the for upland cotton going into the loan, the base price is 52 cents. The base price for ELS cotton going into the loan is 95. So, you look at that, that's very incentivizing. As I talk to merchants and asking them what are they actually getting for ELS cotton that's successfully grown here, you hear estimates anywhere from 95 to $1.15, from $1.20 to upwards sometimes of $1.80. So I think that's what has generated the interest in it, because of that extra increase in price. But traditionally, full Pima cotton is about 50% of the yield potential of your best upland, and these hybrids are generally about 25% of the upland yield potential. So you are giving up some on yield potential, but you're gaining a lot more on price. So a lot of growers are putting pencil to this and trying to determine, is this a strategy that can work in my operation?
And it would take some extra high-priced equipment too.
Yes, yeah. So either some custom harvesters coming in with spindle pickers, or the investment in a spindle picker.
Well, right now most of it is grown in California. Is that correct?
California and a little bit in Arizona, but primarily California.
All right. So what's your guess on acreage this year? Have you had a good feel for talking with farmers and getting an idea on how much they maybe have cut?
I think prior to planting, when it was dry, I think that estimate would have been fairly low, something along the lines of what we saw maybe in 2022. So in the southern high plains here, maybe 3.4 million, give or take some change. As it began raining, you heard a lot more optimism during planting season. And so I was thinking, well, maybe we'll be a bit higher. And I think that may be the case in the areas north of Lubbock, all the way through the panhandle north of Amarillo. I think maybe we saw a little bit more cotton acres go in because they did get rains and they got irrigation capacity comparatively. South of Lubbock, as we sit here today on May 29th, unless those guys get a little bit of rain, to be able to put that dry land crop and that light water crop in the ground, I don't know that we're going to see a lot of acres. Of course, there is some incentive to go ahead and plant cotton for insurance purposes, and we don't like to see that. I think everyone wants to produce volume. They want to pursue success, but we do enjoy those safety nets that keeps the industry floating in those rough years. It's just this would be the fourth rough year in a row. And that's tough for those operations to tolerate. So how many acres is a good question, because a good portion of those acres are south of Lubbock and are in flux right now. So the next 2 weeks are going to tell the tale.
Well, there could be a silver lining in all this, because we're getting into tropical storm season. And
Right.
they are talking about a tropical storm Alvin building on the west coast of Mexico, moving northward and dumping all that moisture your direction, maybe early next week. Fingers crossed, maybe you'll be able to snag some of that moisture and maybe save the day. That could be $1 million rain and then some.
It's sad when you wish for a hurricane, right?
Well, but anyway, I think a lot of people would benefit if that moisture would
absolutely.
trail northward from you and go up into the central plains and maybe the western corn belt. I think everybody could use some.
Oh, sure. Yeah, everybody would benefit. And like I say, we do have a good portion of the windows still in the south of Lubbock. We got till June 20th to get the crop in for dry land. And of course, there's a grace period after that. So really, we have quite a bit of time. Right now it's dry down there, but what's the chances of getting some moisture between now and June 20th? I like my odds.
Well, nowadays they even grow cotton up to about the southern third of Kansas.
Yes.
Have you heard how the crop production is going, like through Oklahoma and into southern Kansas?
Well, Oklahoma in particular, and then central Kansas have gotten quite a bit of rain. So I think they're still struggling to put their crop in. But what a problem to have to get too much rain to put a cotton crop in. So because my rule is you can always make more money with water than without in most cases. I would say from central Oklahoma eastward, they're probably dodging some showers. Western Oklahoma has been able to put their crop in from what I hear. Same thing with southwest Kansas. I think for the most part, what those cotton acres that were devoted there are in the ground. I've seen some pictures and talked to some folks who have seen a stand establishment. So that's good news. Interestingly, I did get one call from a grower and then a fellow researcher in southeast Colorado that they're planting a little bit of cotton as well. Not a lot, obviously, but it's kind of interesting that even Colorado is getting into the cotton game while we're still fighting with 68 cents down here in the biggest cotton patch in the world. So somebody thinks somewhere that growing cotton is still a good idea.
Now, if we can just get that demand situation straightened out, I think we'll be looking a lot better. I appreciate the update, Ken. Always good to visit with you, and best of luck to you and everybody in the cotton part of the country there. I know you're right in the center of production, so fingers crossed for everybody there. And thanks again for the update. I hope to talk with you a little later on in the season. We'll compare notes at that time. Ken Lege with us, and let's see if I get this right. Assistant Professor and Extension Cotton Specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. I believe I got it all in there.
You got
Ken,
it.
thanks again so much. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Wear cotton.
Yeah. Amen. All right. That'll do it for this episode. Appreciate you joining us. For producer Breanne Jenkins, I'm Marlin Bohling. We'll catch you next time right here on the Comstock Channel. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and or options is substantial, and each investor and or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.